Hello, my name is Jason Hearne. I'm going to show you something using Mocha Pro that made me rethink how awesome Adobe After Effects Puppet Tool is. When combined with the mystical power of Mocha Pro, Puppet Tool can provide a distortion mesh that'll give you amazing results for mapping textures onto objects in video. Now I know what you're thinking. Mocha already does this without Puppet Tool. Sure, but if you're ever coming across mapping things onto anything organic, it's usually a pain in the butt. But this should clear up any of that kind of thinking, hopefully. In this tutorial, I'm going to go over a technique that Mary Poplin at Imagineer Systems helped me and my fellow designers create so we could convincingly make paint ooze across a naked model while walking, twisting, and bouncing. We initially thought that we would have to stabilize the footage and lay the texture over that and then destabilize the footage. But we're using After Effects, which makes it a little more difficult to do. And some of the initial tests weren't working out the way that we had hoped also. But this Puppet Tool technique was not only very good, it was also very easy. The only thing you have to do is make sure you're keeping your project organized as you go along. If it's well organized, you'll be able to keep up with all the data you'll be dealing with. So when using this technique that I'm about to show you, keep this in mind. Work from bottom to top, right to left. This will help you keep things straight as you combine all your elements and tracking data. Both Mocha Pro and After Effects will stack layers/effects with your first pin, brush, mask, or layer at the bottom, while your last one will be at the top. So when you're clicking around on your footage, be sure to start at the bottom and work your way up to the top. This way you don't have to keep track of too much information, and depending on the complexity of your distortion mesh, which you're about to see, that could get pretty dense. So I'm going to jump right into it. Here's the footage of our bare chest that we want our paint to ooze across. I'm going to turn this into this. So now let's head over to After Effects. I have my project items imported already. I'm going to grab this footage and place it in a blank composition. I've pre-keyed and pre-rendered the footage and also rendered it oversized so that my paint texture won't get cropped when I move it into my final comp for output. So I'll select my footage, go to Animate menu, choose Track in Mocha AE. I have the preference setting in Mocha Pro to open on this command instead of Mocha AE, which ships with After Effects. So now I'm in Mocha Pro. I'm going to set up a few layers to track this guy's torso movements. Now I'll turn on perspective on each layer so I can get as much of the 3D feel as possible as his torso flexes and twists. I'll rename each layer so I can better follow which layer is which. This will help when we take the info over to After Effects. Now we'll track. I've already pre-tracked this shot, so we don't have to sit around and wait for my slow laptop to do the job. Now I'm going to copy and paste all my tracking data from Mocha Pro over to After Effects. When I choose what tracking data to use, I must make sure I've selected one of the corner pin formats to export. I like to use the export for Red Giant out of habit. Any of them should work though. So I'm just going to go back and forth until I got it all pasted in After Effects. Back and forth. I'm pasting the corner pin data onto solids. These will act as visual guides so I know where to put each puppet pin. Now I'm going to rename them so they match the layer names in Mocha Pro. Now I'm going to add my paint texture to the shot. I've created this out of 4 or 5 frames in Photoshop from some of the other footage in order to cover the amount of chest we will have to work on. I've also made some distortion adjustments to the chest that I already know will be a problem when he turns his chest towards us. This was all figured out during initial compositing, but here I've cleaned it up to make it more of an easy to follow process. Now that my texture is in, I'm going to start adding my puppet pins to it, using the corner pin solids as guides. Don't put puppet pins on the white guide layers. Only put the pins on the texture. Now the way Puppet Tool works, when first putting pins on a layer, the tool will analyze the layer and detect RGB information only. The mesh will be created around the RGB information at the time on the timeline. So I want no oozing effect yet, because I want my mesh to cover the entire layer. Later, I can go back and add masks and mats. Puppet Tool will then distort my alpha channel, which is what I want. I'm going to add all my puppet pins working from bottom to top, right to left. I'm going to ignore this corner. There can only be 1 puppet pin per triangle. Puppet Tool rules. At each solid, I'm working my way from bottom to top, right to left. Take note how I'm working my way up one solid, then moving to the next one, just to the left, and working my way up it. Now that I have all my puppet pins in, I'll need to rename the pins so I can keep everything straight in my head. I've already renamed all the puppet pins in another comp, so let me just use those to get us going. Now that all this is done, as you can see, the puppet pins are labeled. The easy part now starts. I'll select all my keyframes that Puppet Tool made when each one was applied and set expressions for all. Now I'll pick whip each set for its corresponding corner pinned layer. This is where the organization helps. Now I'm going to speed up the video so it goes a little faster, but it's important to see it needs to be done with all puppet pins. Delete any you are not using. Now that they are all connected, the corner pin data is driving the puppet pins. Now in order to trim the distorted paint texture, I'll use the alpha info from the keyed chest on top. In my texture comp, I'm going to turn on a mask that is a rudimentary representation of a liquid edge. This gives us a better look at how well our Puppet Tool distortion mesh is working. Turn off the guide layers, but don't delete them. You still need the corner pin data. So this now cleans up everything. Now you can add any extra animation on your texture layer to give it that extra polish. So I can see this working for many types of shots, and it's just another way that you can use the awesome power of Mocha Pro to make cool and convincing shots. Thanks for watching, and happy tracking.